Hello everyone, today's video returns us to East German kit, and what we're going to have a look at here is a pair of East German Flächentarn ammunition pouches, or Blumentarn to use the colloquial term, flower camouflage. And this is the earlier example, not the earliest, but the earlier example of camouflage used by East Germany, extensively used by East Germany, for both the uniform and the equipment in a way that Strichtarn would be later on. Of course, there is colloquially referred to as the amoeba camouflage pattern, a very blotchy camouflage pattern which was used on camouflage oversuits during the 1950s. This is the first Flächentarn. Flächentarn is the first camouflage to be used for both uniform and equipment. So you see the ammunition pouches made in the cloth as well. Now these are a left and right handed pair. One holds 2 magazines and the other one holds 3. And that's how they were intended to be worn, although most photographs of these in use show one or the other being carried. And that seems to be generally how these were eventually used. And of course, by the mid-late 1960s, there'd been a move to the single ammunition pouch to be carried on the right hip of the wearer, which would contain all 4 magazines if 4 magazines were being carried. And we've looked at a selection of those pouches previously on the channel. These are a little different. They don't have 2 sections sort of stacked on top of one another or side by side to give that extra carrying capacity. There's effectively 1 layer of magazines across the pouch, and that's a slightly odd description, but you'll see what I mean when we have a look at these. And we're going to have a look at both of them in some detail now. So here we have the 2 pouches we're going to talk about. The one on the left here has already featured in a video looking at East German magazine pouches, ammunition pouches. The one on the right is a relatively recent arrival. It actually came from the US, where these seem to be relatively common to find compared to over here. They do turn up on German eBay from time to time, but they're quite expensive there. And this was quite a good price from the US. It is in soiled condition, as you can see, and these are not a matched pair in terms of the camouflage print, but they are both examples of the Flächentarn ammunition pouches, the 3 and 2 cell versions. And how we have them here, if you were looking at the man carrying these, this is how they would appear on the belt if both carried together. Now the fact there are 2 of these pouches with a total carriage capacity across both of them of 5 magazines is unusual in the Eastern Bloc. Generally speaking, equipment mirrored that of the Soviets, with 1 ammunition pouch carried by the time you're looking at this sort of magazine pouch, that is to say for the AK series of rifles. So with a long 30-round magazine, of course. So just something to note here, obviously the later pouches with 1 pouch worn on one side of the equipment that carries 4 magazines, which we've looked at in previous videos, that's really more typical for sort of Eastern Bloc web equipment or low carrying equipment. This setup here is more akin to sort of German Second War practice, although in those cases, generally speaking, the magazine pouches were even on each side in terms of carrying capacity. Obviously here you have the right hand pouch with 3 and the left hand pouch as they're carried. We're looking at them the opposite way around here, of course, but as they're carried, that's the way they are. This is the left hand, that's the right hand. They are uneven in terms of carrying capacity. As I say, these aren't a matched pair in terms of the camouflage print, so that's something to note at the start here. It's unfortunate this one is as heavily soiled as it is, but it does mean I have at least a pair of these to sort of show and display if I want to, much as they aren't matched. The overall design is similar, but for the carrying capacity. Obviously they are also reversed in terms of the curvature, so that makes them a little bit more comfortable to wear. And as we'll see, the belt loops on the back are angled as well to assist with that, to keep the legs clear basically when these are carried. They use mushroom studs and buttonholes to close the main flap, as you can see there. The construction of these is extensively reinforced with rivets, and you can see that there. We have them reinforcing the internal dividers here. There's one at the back there as well for the D-ring, which the suspenders would clip into. You have reinforcement obviously stitched on section of cloth there where the mushroom stud is fitted, so it doesn't actually pass through the lining material. You can see there's a bit of wear there, but it's actually fitted to this piece of cloth, and then the piece of cloth is stitched in place. So you can see there, that's how these are attached. Rivets at the side here to reinforce the side seams as well. And on the back here, you can see what I mean about the angled loops. So this, if it sat on the belt buckle would be here, the center of the belt would be here, and it angles then away from the legs to give it a little bit more freedom of movement. And you have a ring at the top here, which the suspenders would hook onto to support these directly. And the same is true of this here. So if we flip them over now, you can see how these would be angled on the belt. The center line of the body would be here, with the belt buckle facing outwards, so they curve away. The way these are sort of tipped by having the belt loops set as they are, it pulls them away from the legs out to the side, which is a neat part of the design. You can see, again, we have the reinforced belt loops on the back here. They're all reinforced with rivets. You can see the rivet at the top there, reinforcing the central divider on the 2-cell pouch, and the rivet reinforcing the attachment point for this ring at the top, set slightly higher on the 2-cell pouch, just a manufacturing variation, a detail variation. This really is quite heavily soiled, as you can see. Some nice photographs of these being used individually in the 1970s by the Kampfgruppen der Arbeiterklasse. So from that point of view, quite a nice thing to have. It'll feature in my Kampfgruppen kit going forward, no doubt. Suitably soiled, you know, it's seen hard use, so it suits that role quite effectively. It's been heavily used and then passed on to the Kampfgruppen. You can see more clearly under here, under the flap, the original colour of this, and you can see it's close to this one, but it is not quite the same print. But it does give you an indication of how badly soiled this is. I haven't done anything to try and clean it really. I haven't wanted to, but that just gives you an indication there of the change in colour that's occurred over time. Again, you can see the central divider there reinforced with rivets. The construction details are basically the same between the two. But there it is. That's the left and right pouches from this set, as I say. These appear, I believe, in the late 1950s, and then they used through, by the NVA, they used through to the middle 1960s. As I say, by that point, generally being used singly as opposed to as a pair. You do see some early photographs of these used as a pair as intended, but certainly I think by the mid-60s that's becoming less common. And then there is evidence of sort of Kampfgruppen use going forward into the 1970s, which makes sense. A lot of NVA kit was sort of passed on to the Kampfgruppen when it became obsolete in NVA service. So, as I say, just an interesting sort of deviation from standard Warsaw pack practice, I guess you could say, in having two handed ammunition pouches for use on the equipment. And as I say, in that respect, they differ quite significantly from later East German practice, later NVA practice as well. So hopefully this has been a detailed enough overview of these. They're quite a simple design, no drainage eyelets or anything in the bottom. And as I said at the start, they're sort of one magazine deep, if you will. Each pocket contains one magazine rather than being another layer of magazines. And that's obviously how you end up with a pouch. Effectively, the size carrying 4 is you have another layer of magazines, another 2 compartments sort of layered on top of these, and a flap over all of them. And that, of course, is the design that the NVA would persevere with later on, which we've looked at extensively in a previous video, looking at the evolution of various different versions of NVA ammunition pouches. So I hope you found it interesting looking at these. Not the best examples by any means, but East German isn't my focus in terms of collecting. So they're good enough for my purposes, as it were. Obviously they aren't a matched pair in terms of the actual print, and the 2-cell version is far more heavily worn and soiled than the 3-cell example, so they don't match in that regard. But nevertheless, they are examples of these pouches, and I'm very happy to have them in the collection. And obviously, it's given me the opportunity to sort of talk about the design. These were also made in Stricktarn as well, to some degree. There are examples out there made in Stricktarn, so that's something to note here, which I didn't mention in the main body of the video. And similarly, you do see Flächentarn examples of the later ammunition pouches with the quick release tabs and so forth, where an individual pouch will hold 4 magazines. So there's some crossover there, which is also true of uniforms as well. In the mid-1960s, both Flächentarn and Stricktarn were both being used to manufacture uniforms before Stricktarn became standardized. So it's an interesting period, the middle 1960s, the middle to late 1960s, for sort of NVA uniform and kit, because there is this transition period from one camouflage pattern to the other, and they were mixed and matched to some degree as well. That's perhaps something we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a future video. But that's everything for this video. I think we've covered the topic here as best I can. If you have found it interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. But that is everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.